Okay. Like I said, this webinar is being recorded live. My name is Nate Williams from Practice Financial Group. For those of you who don't know, Practice Financial Group is dedicated to serving the financial needs of dental practice owners. And right now we are anxiously engaged and very active in trying to help all of you navigate what has become very difficult and shifting ground. It's like we're all trying to walk during an earthquake. And so that's what this webinar is about. The purpose is to address questions about the PPP loan. A lot has changed since the last webinar we gave just 2 work days ago, which was on Friday. This webinar will be recorded and we'll put it up on our website. We'll post it on our blog today. And so if you know of somebody else who wants to watch it, go ahead and send it out to them, or you can watch it later, whatever. The first thing I want to do is I want to acknowledge my team who is not here, who has been helpful. The PFG COVID-19 Task Force, Ryan Feige, Kyler Johnson, and Spencer Kenley. These guys have been working long hours and have really just been so great and invaluable. Also, Ryan Miller, Kate Kostenko, and Maribel Flores, although not technically on the task force, I don't know that they made the cut. They've provided some valuable information and help, and just been such a great resource to the rest of us. Also, the next webinar that we're going to host will be on Friday. That'll be this Friday. What day is that? The 10th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we're scheduling that out. Hopefully, we're not going to be talking entirely about the PPP loan, but I just wanted to go over a lot of the financial principles, where we've gone, some of the things that you need to be aware of, big picture, and what you should be doing now and where we should be looking to go next. So that'll be this Friday at 1 p.m. Hopefully, very helpful information. That's our goal. One of the things I want to mention, we're trying to do a lot of mass communication like this webinar. However, the goal in doing this is not to not talk to our clients one by one. The strategic decisions you need to be made really need to be made one by one. Every individual case is different. And so, so a lot of the emails and text messages that I've been getting start like this. Nate, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're so busy, but I just want to be really clear. We absolutely don't have that attitude of we're too busy and we don't want to help you. So please don't apologize to me or to anyone else at Practice Financial Group for asking questions or asking for our time. It's our pleasure and our joy to be able to help you. It's our job to be here and to help you guys. So we take these responsibilities very seriously. Just what we will ask is just please be patient with us because we are just getting inundated with a lot of questions. So just be patient. We're doing the best we can. One of the things about this webinar, I haven't yet opened the question and answer. I will open the question and answer in a little bit. I haven't opened that up yet because I'm going to proactively address a lot of the questions we've been getting. So if you can just hold the questions that you have, and then what I'm going to do when I'm done with my prepared remarks is I'm going to open it up for question and answer, and I'm going to give a few minutes for you guys to write out your questions in the Q&A box, and then like last time, I'll give it some time for you to read through questions that other people are asking, and you can vote on those questions, or I should say you can like the questions, and the questions with the most likes get bumped to the top of the list, and those will be the first questions that I'll address. So that will be coming here in just a few minutes. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test our technical abilities, and I'm going to ask some polling questions. And these polling questions, we've tested this out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to open up the polling question now, and I'm going to launch that. I'm going to allow panelists to vote and launch the polling question. So the polling question is out there. And if you guys can start answering these questions, I just think this will be good information for us, and I think it will be really good information for you guys to have as well, at a minimum, interesting information. So it says attendees are now viewing questions, but 0 questions have been answered. Okay, we're starting to get our first answer. So please take a few minutes, read through the polling questions, and answer those if you can. Question, where is the polling question hosted? I don't know. My computer doesn't show the poll. Let me see if I can answer that. So 2 people have seen it. Let's see, someone says, okay, I'm gonna end the polling question and I'm gonna start it one more time. So here we go, relaunching the polling question. Hopefully it'll just pop up on your screen. Okay, I just relaunched the polling question. So it looks like it deleted all of the previous answers. So if you've answered those before, you might need to answer them again. Question, can you see the polling questions? Someone says, I just see your face. Okay, most people aren't seeing anything. Some people are because they're answering the questions. Anyways, we'll try to, I think that whole polling question flopped. We'll try to get that worked out before next time, and then we'll answer those. Okay, so I'm going to end the polling questions and move on. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's get into the topic or the content that I want to share with you guys. So the first and big question that's on everybody's mind, and it will still probably be relevant to a lot of you, is the question of when should I apply? On Friday was the very first day that the Treasury Department said that any banks would be accepting applications, and some banks did start accepting application on Friday, April 3rd. At that point in time, and in the webinar that I gave on Friday, our advice was to hold off and to not apply. And I used the example from Braveheart of all the guys running, the English running towards the Scottish soldiers and them waiting till just the precise moment to lift up their spears. So again, I clarified that our advice wasn't to not apply at all, but what we were saying and what we were trying to explain was that the issue isn't if to apply, the issue is when to apply. So the question, when should I apply? If you apply now versus if you wait to apply, there are risks and rewards of doing both. If you apply now, the risk is that it's possible that nothing is forgiven and that you miss out on free money. That's the risk. But the reward of applying for now is there's a higher probability of getting the loan at all. And so remember, what we said was that worst case scenario, if you apply for this loan, is that you just get a normal loan at a 1% annualized interest rate, which is an extremely low rate. And we would recommend to everybody who is in your shoes to apply for this loan. If you wait to apply, the risk is that the funding may run out. The reward of waiting to apply is that there's a much higher probability that some or all of the loan would be forgiven. And so those are just risks and rewards that every individual is going to have to weigh for him or herself. So last time I used the example of Braveheart, I want to share another analogy to try to explain the predicament that everybody's in with regard to this loan. And the analogy is going to come from the great American sport baseball. If any of you have ever played baseball or watched baseball, but particularly played baseball, as you know, you get 3 strikes before you're out. And the best case scenario, if you're a batter up to bat in baseball, is that you hit a home run. That is the best case scenario. And so waiting to apply is akin to waiting for that perfect pitch, hoping you're going to get a perfect pitch and that you can hit that pitch out of the park and you get a home run. But in waiting for that perfect pitch, there's the risk that the perfect pitch may never come, and there's the risk that you might strike out, meaning that the funds dry up and you don't get an opportunity for the loan. If you apply now, it's akin to swinging at a pitch that isn't ideal, but has a very high probability of hitting it and that you're going to get on base. And so that's what you've got to weigh right now. Do I want to wait for the perfect pitch to try to hit a home run? Or do I want to just take the pitch that I'm being given right now, knowing that I probably won't hit a home run, but that I have a high probability of getting on base? So that's kind of the situation that everybody's in. More on the timing and what to do. Our advice is, if you want to get on base, apply now. This is different advice than we gave on Friday. Friday was the very first day. Nobody knew anything about what was happening or what was going to happen on Friday, and we were saying, hold on, just wait a little longer. One of the things that I have to say, we can't accurately forecast how this is going to go. In fact, nobody can accurately forecast how this is going to go. Even the President of the United States, President Trump, has been petitioning Congress for more funds for this program, meaning even he doesn't have control over how this is going to go, and he can't accurately forecast how this is going to go. And so it is possible that if you wait to apply, the funds will dry up and you will not get any money for this loan. It's also possible that if you apply now and you start that 8-week clock, there will be people who wait till June 29th to apply, and Congress extends the amount of funds available for the program, and it is possible that some of your colleagues will wait, they'll roll the dice, wait for that better pitch, and will hit a home run. That's very possible. So whatever you decide, you have to be willing to own the risks and the rewards of that decision. Some other consideration: banks are processing hundreds of thousands of applications. As of last night, and I spoke to a VP at Bank of America this morning, as of last night, Bank of America had received over 205,000 applications totaling $38 billion worth of loans. In the very first weekend of being open, Wells Fargo hit their max of $10 billion that they can apply to these loans. And we'll talk about Wells Fargo in just a minute. Every banker that we've spoken to has said in answer to the question, what would you do if you were a dentist? They've all said, I would apply now. And then they've all said, and I would try to defer the funds as long as possible. It may take, so just more information, it may take weeks to be approved. For most of you, the longer it takes to get approved, the better off you'll be. And hopefully, and what we're really hoping for and keeping our fingers crossed, is that you can apply now, secure your loan amount but defer the receipt of funds until a later date. So on this point of applying now and deferring the funds until a later date, for the record, this is not clear. It has not been made clear by the SBA or the Treasury. Definitely the CARES Act itself didn't make this clear. I'm well aware that a larger CPA firm has said and is written on their website that this can be done. You can apply and defer those funds. Maybe they're smarter than we are. Maybe they have contacts that we don't have, but we haven't been able to ascertain that with any degree of trustworthiness, I'll say. So from Bank of America, this was his wording to me with regard to this question. He says, internally, we're being told that the guaranteed funds are tied to disbursement, which starts the 8-week clock, not approval. It's my understanding that once approved, the borrower has to acknowledge approval and will have a period of time to decide when to take the money. However, my understanding is that period will be days, not months. So this was sent to me this morning by a contact at Bank of America. And so again, it's everybody's hope that dentists will be able to apply for the loan, be approved, get the loan amount guaranteed to them, but then delay at their discretion, the dentist's discretion, until a later time when they want to apply. Again, if it were me, I would apply now and then use any influence I had to delay the funds. The other thing I would recommend, when the bill was passed, when HR 6201 was passed, which was the bill that said you're mandated to pay for sick leave and this Extended Family Medical Leave Act, if you guys all remember that, the ADA and others lobbied Congress and said, hey, we want this changed because this is not feasible for businesses who are closed. And lo and behold, it got changed. So this very point is something worth petitioning the ADA to petition the government about changing. Again, giving dentists the ability to apply now, secure the funds, but have at the dentist's discretion the time when they can use the funds and start the 8-week clock. So that's all I'm going to say about that for right now, unless we get more questions later. Some more information about the PPP application. Applying for the EIDL loan and the PPP loan. You can apply for both. It is misinformation, and misinformation was circulated earlier in the week that if you applied for the EIDL loan, you cannot apply for the PPP loan. Our understanding, which is reading the black and white text from the bill itself passed in Congress, the SBA, the Treasury, and talking to all these different banks, is that this is absolutely false. In fact, the PPP loan application asks for the amount that you were given in the EIDL loan. Now, with regard to that, when you're applying for the PPP loan, when it asks that question, how much did you get for the EIDL loan? If you haven't received any funds yet, just indicate that you haven't received any funds. And then just clarify that with your bank, that you have applied for the EIDL loan, but you haven't gotten anything yet. Another point, most banks are only working with existing clients at this point in time. Why is this? There exists in the banking world something called the FinCEN laws. This stands for Financial Criminal Enforcement Network. As part of the Patriot Act passed in the early 2000s under George W. Bush, these FinCEN laws were enacted, and it's additional regulation for financial institutions, banks in particular, to verify the identity of the people who are banking with them. And so in order to comply with these laws, banks are required to fill out something called a customer information file, or CIF. And the CIF is basically where the bank verifies your identity. They need different forms of identification, certain things like that. The reason why banks are only taking applications at this point in time from current customers is because of these FinCEN laws. And because this process, the process of complying with these regulations is very cumbersome. It takes a long time. It takes several days. And banks are so inundated with these PPP applications that for now they're saying, we don't want to bother with this. We're only going to accept applications from existing clients. And the Treasury Department has told banks that they can waive any new verification under the FinCEN laws. So that's that. Another question, why did PFG send out inaccurate numbers yesterday, then revise those numbers today? If you guys remember, we sent out to each one of our clients the number, which is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll amount. So good question. For clarification, the numbers we sent out weren't inaccurate. Since we sent out these numbers yesterday, the laws literally changed. The laws have been changing, and the rules and the guidance has been changing on these loans every single day since the loan was enacted on March 27th. So since yesterday, last night, the Treasury published a new FAQ document that says a couple of things. The first question I want to address is, does the payroll calculation need to be perfect? And the answer to that is no. And this is from the Treasury FAQ. If lenders identify errors in the borrower's calculation, the lender should work with the borrower to remedy the error, meaning that they're expecting errors. They know that everybody's trying to do their best. The Treasury isn't going to come out and simply say, hey, just do your best and don't worry if the numbers are accurate or not. They're not going to come out and say that specifically, but what they're saying here is essentially just that. Just do your best and work it out with your lender. So the new guidance issued late yesterday said that the employer portion of payroll taxes cannot be included. So that was new guidance, new clarification as of yesterday. Before that, there was a question around that. We obviously included that number because it gave a higher number, but they came out and said, no, you can't include that number. Then further clarification came out as to what can be included in retirement contributions. Specifically, they mentioned defined benefit contributions or cash balance plan contributions. So those clarifications are going to materially affect the calculation for a lot of our clients. So if you haven't applied yet, and we sent out an email earlier today, if you haven't applied yet and you're a Practice Financial Group client, send an email to your planning team today, request that we recalculate this number for you, and we have our whole entire planning team working just on this calculation for our client. We've set everything else aside, and this is our top priority. And we'll respond with the accurate number as soon as possible. The other thing is, yesterday we sent out the number because that's what the application asks for, is the number. But a lot of the banks, as our clients have been applying, a lot of the banks are asking for them to show the calculation. How did you come up with that number? So what we're sending out today is the revised number and the whole calculation as to how we came up with that number. So moving on, what if my bank won't do PPP loans? So as of yet, many banks are not taking applications, but will do so soon. So our advice is to contact your bank to inquire. For example, Columbia Bank, which is does a lot of dental lending and is a very popular big bank in the dental space. Their portal isn't live yet, but as of right now, they are taking manual applications from clients, and then they are, let's see, And they're working on their portal to get it up there as soon as possible. Hold on, somebody said here, somebody raised their hand. Actually, just hold your question, Brian, and put it in the question box, and as soon as I launch that, and I'll get to that as soon as possible. Don't panic. The clear goal, this is just a personal opinion. The clear goal of all the parties involved, Congress, the SBA, the Treasury, the various banks who are involved, which is pretty much all banks, is to help small business owners. The tremendous effort that's being made right now with this PPP loan program is not designed to keep people out. It's designed to be helpful and to get money to small businesses so that they can thrive or survive at least this shutdown that we're experiencing. So I don't recommend panicking. If you haven't applied yet, I don't think you've missed the bus, missed the boat, whatever. I think you can still calmly get your application in. Another question, how to apply for partnerships. On Friday, this question was asked. Other accounting firms have advised people to, if you have a partnership owned by different S corporations, they've advised to apply for each entity, each S corporation and the partnership to apply. So I know that all of the accounting firms who are issuing guidance, we're all trying to do our best, but respectfully, that information is inaccurate. If you're a partnership, and that is owned by S corporations, you are deemed affiliates and you should apply together at the partnership level. Here's some official guidance. Concerned entities are affiliates of each other when one controls or has control over the other. Okay, so if you have a partnership and it's owned by an S corp down here, if this S corp has control over the partnership, these two entities are deemed affiliates, and therefore they should apply together. So even if you're a minority owner, less than 51%, if you have the ability to block action by the shareholders, you are deemed affiliates. So we've got clients who have a partnership owned by 5 S corporations. There are 5 partners. And so none of them have a controlling interest individually. But if those entities have the ability to block action, meaning, and a lot of operating agreements are written this way, where decisions, any decisions by the shareholders needs to be a unanimous vote of the shareholders. So if even that 20% owner has the ability to block action by the group, then you're deemed affiliates. So this is very comparable to the pension laws. If you have a partnership owned by 2 S corporations, when we're doing a 401k, for example, we don't have each entity have its own 401k. We combine all of these as an affiliated service group or a controlled group, and we do the 401k plan, just one 401k plan for the whole group. The very same thing applies to this. Again, if you're in a partnership owned by S corporations, you should apply as one entity, and then you should take the salary from the S corporations and add that to the salary of the partnership and apply at that level. Next question. My office is still open. What about sick pay? We've been getting this question from a couple of different clients. In mid-March, Congress passed the bill HR 6201 that provides mandatory sick leave for employees who have symptoms of COVID-19, are caring for family members with symptoms or who have COVID-19, or are caring for a child whose school is closed. Or sick leave amount is based, and the sick leave amount is based on what you would have paid this employee. So just to clarify once and for all, for offices that are closed, or for offices that are nearly closed, meaning only open for emergencies, these sick leave requirements do not apply. So the only time the sick leave or the Extended Family Medical Leave Act will apply to is when and if when you open your practice and if you have employees who qualify. So some other FAQs. Do we include an associate doctor who is paid as an independent contractor in payroll? No. If you have an associate doctor who's paid as a W-2 employee, yes, you should include them. If they're an independent contractor, no, don't include them. Are there other sources of funds I should seek after, and should I seek after those? Yes, there are other sources of funds, and yes, you should seek after those. So we don't know what all of the sources of funds are. But for example, when the coronavirus first hit, and when it was even suggested that our clients would need to possibly shut down their practices or slow down their practices, immediately we sent out communication recommending to every one of our clients to go and apply for lines of credit, personal lines of credit, business lines of credit, any line of credit that you can get your hands on to apply for that. We didn't recommend that you go and max those out, although others are recommending that you do max those out. We did not recommend that. We recommended securing the line of credit and having it available. Which one of those is right? Should you max out the line of credit? I don't know. If it were me, I wouldn't. Another one of our clients mentioned that there's a grant from Delta Dental of Washington. He said that it's a $15,000 grant. I went to their website earlier today and looked at that. It's right here. Delta Dental of Washington is providing some financial support for dentists in the state of Washington. I don't know if your state has this. That would be great if it does. Let me ask this of you. If you know of other sources of funds available to dentists, either nationally or in your state, please email us at coronavirus@practicefinancialgroup.com, and we'll share that information with the rest of our clients. That would be very helpful. The point is, there are a lot of people who have a vested interest in the viability and the security of your industry and of your company, and so a lot of people willing to help. So that concludes the prescribed and pre-planned FAQ part of the webinar. And I just got notice from Kevin Prates that the portal from Columbia Bank is officially live. So I knew they were working on it today. And so, yeah, if you're a Columbia Bank client, go there and apply. So as you guys can remember, there's a spot that you should be able to see on your screen. I've got 21 questions so far. There's a Q&A section that where you can ask questions, and I'm going to give just a few minutes for you guys to ask a few more questions. You can also there's a little thumbs up where you can like the question. If you're interested in a particular question, go ahead and hit the like button. And then the questions with the most likes will go to the top, and I'm going to answer those first. So until that time, I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes, maybe two. Okay. So first question that I'm going to go ahead and get started after one more drink of my sparkling water. Okay, here we go. Astros ticket holder Dr. Reed asks, has anyone been funded for the EIDL loan yet, to your knowledge? So let me ask that question to all of you, and if you could answer in the chat box, and I'm going to open the chat so you can see answers from attendees. If you've applied, have you received any money from the EIDL loan? I think that answers the question. 8 days and counting. No, nobody has gotten any of that money. So before now, I hadn't personally heard of anybody else. My friend Wes Reed from Practice Financial or Practice CFO, he said that one doctor that he knows of did get the $10,000. So I know through him of one person. Next question from Asterisk ticket holder Dr. Reed. Should we wait to sign the funding documents once we have been approved of funding? So if you're talking about the PPP loan, any logistical questions of the loan, I would address those questions to your banker. This loan is then the authority to administer this loan is being delegated to the banks. And so at the end of the day, if your bank says yes, then the answer is yes. If your bank says no, then the answer is no. So the question of, back to the question again, should we wait to sign the funding documents once we have been approved of funding? So the issue here, I think, is securing the funds. What you want to be careful of doing is, just because you've applied, that's great. Until you've been secured of the funds, I wouldn't say that you can rest. For example, going back to my baseball analogy, until you have the funds, you're not safe at first or second or third base. You're still up at bat with risk of striking out, risk of not getting the funds. So waiting to sign the funding documents, again, I would clarify that with your banker. And the goal is secure the funds. What I would also try to do is delay the receipt of the funds as long as possible. So we want to secure the funds as soon as possible, delay the receipt of funds as long as possible. And like I said earlier, if I were a dentist and if I had dentist friends, I would let everybody I know, I would ask everyone I know to contact the ADA and ask the ADA to petition their friends in Congress. Again, asterisk ticket holder, Dr. Reed, should we take out the max loan to utilize the funds for higher interest practice equipment loan? Great question. So with the PPP loan, there is no max loan amount or minimum loan amount. There is a very specific calculation as to how much you can apply for. And it's based on your average monthly payroll multiplied by 2.5 months. So what we're doing for you guys, Dr. Reed, is we're calculating the average monthly payroll for the partnership plus the 3 S corporations. We're taking that number and we're adding in profit sharing, defined benefit contributions, we're adding in health insurance, all those things, and we're coming up with a monthly average, and then we're multiplying that by 2.5 times. That is the amount. So there's no discretion of, I want to apply more or I want to apply for less. There's just, here's the amount, and that's the amount that we're recommending you apply for. The second part of your question, which I missed, was should we take those funds and refinance higher interest debt? Absolutely not. There are very specific uses of the funds. Congress, the SBA, and the Treasury has been very clear that these funds are to be used for payroll, rent, mortgage payments, not to refinance mortgage payments, but to make mandatory mortgage payments. And mortgage payments are defined as practice loan or equipment loan, or the actual mortgage on the building if you own it, and utilities. So once you get the funds, I would not start utilizing the funds yet. I would wait, and I would only utilize the funds for those very specific intended purposes. So Sean Platt asks, you keep saying we risk not getting the loan forgiven if we apply now. If I start paying my employees their normal wages, even if we are still closed, why would I not get this forgiven? I know this doesn't help the practice as much because the practice isn't getting the free money, but employees are getting free money instead. It should be still forgiven, right? Sean Platt, that is an excellent question. So as far as the forgiveness and the rules around the forgiveness, let me just say that they haven't been etched in stone yet. I don't know of a person on the planet who has even received $1 of funds for the PPP loan, let alone had any funds forgiven. So I'm gonna what's the word? Disclaim my answer to this question, and that there's still a lot that's changing in this bill, and there's still a lot that's changing in the rules. But here's how I would answer the question right now. If you, right now, I'm assuming, Sean, that your practice is in hibernation, as we're calling it, and your employees are on unemployment. If you start paying your employees right now, you risk your employees getting kicked off of unemployment. So that's risk number one. So if you do that right now, you risk the employees getting kicked off of unemployment, and then you could say, well, in 8 weeks, they can apply again for unemployment. That's true, but that's just something to be aware of, is that your employees could get kicked off of unemployment. The next thing that you have to be aware of is, if you get the funds now and you burn through them over the next 8 weeks and you get that forgiven, that's great. But my question back to you would be, what happens if this COVID-19 lasts for 6 months and you've burned through those funds trying to get them forgiven, but now you don't have the funds and you already took the loan? So again, there isn't a person on the planet who can accurately forecast and predict exactly how this is going to play out. But that's something that I would be considering. And again, Sean, for your very specific circumstances, I wouldn't do anything until after talking to your planner here at Practice Financial Group, or other advisors if you're not a client here. So I hope that answers that question. Jordan Humbert, with regard to rent, utilities, and payroll that can be forgiven, are we able to catch up on rent by paying past due rent and apply it to the 8-week period, i.e. paying 3 months of rent over 8 weeks? So the answer to that question is no. That question was asked previously. You're not able to catch up on rent, nor are you able to prepay rent. You're only able to pay rent that you're contractually obligated to pay. So let me clarify the answer to that question. The specific wording in the legislation and in the subsequent authoritative document says that you can pay rent from a lease agreement that you're legally required to pay from a lease agreement that was dated February 15th, 2020 or before. So you can't go in and change your lease agreement. You can't work out some side deal with your landlord on the lease agreement. You have to abide by the lease agreement in order to get those funds forgiven. So that's what the legislation says. Great question. Aaron Stump, the custom PPP loan amount PFG sent me was different from the one I calculated, given what my bank was asking me. How did PFG calculate that number, and do they have documents to support that number? If so, could that be sent to us? So back to great question, Aaron. So the calculation that we did yesterday, we're changing the calculation today based on the changes in the authoritative documentation that came out last night with regard to the employer contribution and the retirement contributions. The other thing that we're doing today is we're sending out to each of our clients. Yesterday, we only sent out a number. Today, what we're doing is we're sending out a revised number, and we're sending out the whole calculation. Yesterday, all of the applications that we were seeing were just showing the actual number, a space in the application that said 2.5 times monthly payroll. What's the number? But since we've been getting feedback, banks are wanting to see how the calculation. So Aaron Stump, what you should do, and anybody else who has any other question regarding how we got to the number, just email your planning team at Practice Financial Group, and we will recalculate and send the calculation to you. Camden Brown, I'm pretty confused. If we get it, what are we doing with the employees now when we don't have work? So if your employees don't have work, Camden, right now they should be on unemployment. If you get the funds, and again, nobody in America has the funds yet, So everybody in America is on the frontier of this loan and how it's being applied. And so if you don't get it, join the club. So, but in saying that, I'm being a little cheeky, but the serious part of that is once you get the funds, our advice would be to hold the funds and to call us. I think your planner is Ryan Miller. As soon as you get the funds, schedule a call with Ryan and say, I've got the funds, and then make a custom strategic plan for your office and your employees and your state as to what you should do. For me personally, if all of my employees are on unemployment, I'm not jumping the gun and I'm not rushing to bring them back to work if there's no work to do. So, but again, we're all still kind of waiting to see how this plays out a little bit, Camden, before we finalize the question. So just let me just give an analogy here. This is kind of like a game of chess. And we make a chess move, then we wait to see what happens and see what the opponent does. Then we make our next chess move, our next move. Now, really good players of chess will plan out 4, 5, 6, 7 or more moves in advance. And the good player is thinking, here's what I'll probably do, but I'm not for sure going to do those things until I wait and see what the opponent does. In this, we've really got to wait and see, if that makes sense. So next question. So I know that in order to get PPP loan forgiven, I need to use 75% of the funds in payroll. So if I use 50% payroll and 50% rent utilities, does that mean that some of the money used for rent utilities will not be forgiven and just be treated as a 1% loan? My understanding of that question is yes. You're accurate. You're correct that some of that will not be forgiven. Also, am I only able to use PPP loan for these purposes, payroll, rent, utilities? So at this point in time, there was guidance on what there was very clear guidance given on what constitutes forgiveness. There was also very clear guidance on what constitutes how the funds can be used. And there's some similarity there, but there are some differences. The guidance on how the funds can be used says payroll, rent, or mortgage, which I've defined several times, utilities, and it gives this general guideline, or other obligations of the business. So that other obligations of the business means to us other overhead costs. So if you have other things like advertising costs, for example, our understanding today is that, yes, you could use those funds, the PPP loan funds, for those costs, but no, they will not be forgiven. However, again, nobody in America has gotten the funds, so I expect that there's going to be further clarification, further guidance, further focusing on the use of the funds and the forgiveness of the funds. So excellent question. That's the best answer I've got right now. Junior or Cindy, Wells Fargo is my bank. Now that PFG suggests that we apply through another bank, I have called Bank of America, Chase, and American National Bank, but they are only servicing their business partners currently. How do I get around this thing? Junior, that's a very tough. It's a tough situation if you're a Wells Fargo client. Nobody knew this in America until Wells Fargo shut down their applications once they hit $10 billion, which happened in about the first day or two since they opened this. And the reason they did that is because Wells Fargo has some restrictions, government sanctions against them for some fraudulent lending practices and fraudulent banking practices that they had under previous bank leadership. So the big banks, so I don't have an answer for you other than just some advice for you. The big banks right now, Bank of America, Chase, these banks are going to be inundated with loan applications. Like I said earlier, Bank of America, as of the end of the day yesterday, already had over 205,000 loan applications. So when I spoke to bankers earlier today, their advice was to apply, if you're a Wells Fargo customer, to apply with a smaller regional bank. The other advice that I have for you would be to contact any representatives that you have at Wells Fargo. Go back to the person who gave you your practice loan, contact them and ask Wells Fargo, what are you guys advising your customers to do? And that's what I would do. So Devin Clark says, FYI, our business lender, First Internet Bank, is offering PPP loans as well. So they may have, so Devin Clark says First Internet Bank. I spoke to Columbia Bank earlier today just before getting on this call. Their plan and their expectation is that they are going to be doing these loans for non-Columbia Bank clients. So go ahead and say that. Dr. Reed, it says Wells Fargo is currently telling clients to try other banks. Yeah, thanks, Wells Fargo. And Brandon White says, back to Devin Clark, I think he means First Interstate Bank, not First Internet Bank. Devin Clark, if you could get on the chat and clarify that. So great question, Junior or Cindy. Okay, Anonymous, can we accept the 10K COVID EIDL advance if we don't apply for the full, or is the advance dependent on applying for the full EIDL? So at this point in time, applying for the EIDL loan was just going to the SBA.gov and doing that very short application. The only information that they requested was what were your 12 months of revenue and what your 12 months of cost of goods sold, which we interpreted as a general term for overhead. Of course, I'm a CPA, and the CPAs like to get really geeky on specific definitions of things, but I think, but anyways, so at this point in time, there was no, I want to apply for this amount for the EIDL loan. There's just, I want to apply, and nobody has heard anything about that yet. So just on that, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the PPP loan does say, tell us the 2.5 times monthly payroll plus the amount that you got under the EIDL loan. I think the intention is that they refinance all the EIDL loans through the PPP program. However, nobody's gotten the EIDL loan, so just leave that blank. Do I include myself and my family members on payroll and the number of employee count? The answer is yes, Cliff. But when you bring people back, you'll also bring yourself and your family members back, and you'll put them back on payroll. So yourself and your family members will be the easiest people to get back on payroll. Great question. Robbie Shack, will we be required by the lender to pay our employees beginning when we receive the funds, or is this only a stipulation of being able to receive forgiveness? Let me reread that. Oh yeah, good. That question's kind of already been asked, Robbie. As soon as you receive the funds, our understanding is you'll be able to start paying your employees at that moment in time. The question should also be asked, should you start paying your employees at that moment in time? And we don't know exactly the answer to that question yet, but if it were me, Nate's dental practice, if I got the loan fund today, I'm waiting for further clarification before I bring all of my employees back. I'm also considering the collateral damage of getting all of my having all of my employees kicked off of unemployment because I'm paying them, and then also, like I said earlier, you run out of funds from the PPP loan. This COVID-19 drags on a lot longer than any of us want it to, and so, yeah, those are answers to that question. Do we have the freedom to do whatever we need to with the PPP funds if we don't need forgiveness of the entire amount? Robbie, I would clarify with your planner here at Practice Financial Group, which I think is Ryan Feige. Talk to him specifically about the use of those funds, just because there's a lot of strategy that's going to be very nuanced to your situation and your practice, which I can't answer right now. Okay, Aaron Stump again, does profit sharing count as retirement contribution? Yes, it does. And we are calculating the profit sharing as part of that number. Clarification, you asked specifically, does profit sharing? So in full disclosure, so far, there hasn't been exact guidance on exactly what retirement contribution means, but they did say defined benefit and defined contributions. A 401k profit sharing is a type of defined contribution plan. So we're interpreting that as yes. Now remember, all that we're doing at this point in time is coming up with a number that you're going to take to your bank to apply for. And we would rather at this point in time err on that number being higher than lower. So we're taking it upon ourselves to interpret that as yes, we're including profit sharing. So Joff Martin, is the loan still so attractive having to pay it back in 2 years, even at 1%? Great question, Joff. So we have no idea how long this COVID-19 is going to last. When governments first came out, they were saying, shut your offices down for the next 2 weeks. In Oregon, the governor of Oregon came out and said, shut it down until June 15th, which was kind of a real sticker shock at first. I actually think she did the right thing by saying that. I think as a dentist, you've got to look at this as a long-term thing. Not long-term like long-term, but if I were in practice, I would look at this as the next 6 months. And so I'm looking at how am I going to still be alive and my business still alive 6 months from now. And in that case, I'm getting as much access to as much cash as I can. Again, the analogy that we put out in the beginning was you're taking a trek across the desert. You need to acquire as much water as you can. You don't know how long you're going to be in the desert. You don't know how long that water is going to last. But right now, the issue that we're dealing with is getting as much water or as much cash as we can. We don't know today how long we're going to be in the desert. So yes, I would apply for the loan. Worst case scenario, it's a 1% loan and big deal. But what I wouldn't do is apply for the loan today and then rush out and burn through the funds. That's what I would not do. Brent Parker, has anyone had their employees receive unemployment yet? So I'll just ask the group, have people had your employees receive unemployment yet? Okay, a lot of yes, some no's. Okay, I'm going to change the question. And these were all part of our polling questions, actually. These are great questions. I'm going to change the question, so stop answering that question. Here's the new question. Have you, the doctor, applied for and received unemployment? Our advice to everybody has been, if you're out of work, to apply for unemployment. Have you applied? First question, and have you received unemployment yet? So it looks like most people have applied and most people have not received funds yet. Yeah. Okay. Next question, Camden Brown, should we still apply for unemployment if applying for PPP, or are we bringing staff back? So again, advice, again, back to the water in the desert analogy, we're trying to acquire as much cash as we can. That's the principle. We want as much cash as we can. And we don't know how long we're going to be in this desert. We don't know how long this COVID-19 thing is going to last. I've heard slogans like 30 days to flatten the curve. Yeah, that's great. I applaud the efforts to flatten the curve. But if you think about it, even if we flatten the curve over the next 30 days from now, if the virus still exists, and if everybody goes back to their normal activity, don't we experience a second spike? So I'm not a health expert, but just, my reasoning and my common sense thinking leads me to believe that this could be a longer thing. For me, I'm looking at this going, I'm going to try to survive 6 months. But again, we're trying to acquire as much cash as we can, and we're trying to make that cash last as long as possible. So if it were me, I would apply for the PPP loan. I would have already applied for the EIDL loan as well. When I get those funds, I would not if it were me, rush to bring everybody back right away. Now, again, my advice might change tomorrow, and my advice might change a week from now. But today, April 7th, if I get these funds, I'm not rushing to bring everybody back. Why? Because I'm looking at this going, okay, there is the opportunity for 2 months of loan forgiveness. That's attractive. But there's also the risk that this drags out a long time. I've burned through my funds, and 6 or 7 months from now, I'm finally going back to practice, and I don't have any working capital at that point in time. And so I think personally that that's a much bigger risk than is the risk of not getting the loan forgiven. So that's how I would answer that question. Admittedly, don't have a crystal ball. Admittedly, don't yet know how this is going to play out. I think as time goes on, we'll get more clarity around that. Kevin Prates, I received an email with the amount that was calculated for me. Then I received a new email this morning saying, wait for a new amount. When will I receive the new calculated amount? Okay, in that second email, Kevin, we gave you the instruction. So some people had already applied for the loan. And so the number we gave them yesterday was a moot point. Other people applied for the loan yesterday. And so they used the number that we gave them yesterday. So us saying we've got a new number is a moot point also. And earlier in this webinar, I said that if you don't have the perfect number, don't distress, just do your best. But for people who haven't submitted their application, or for people who haven't applied yet, or for people who can go back to their bank and change the number, what we're saying is if you're in that boat, so Kevin, if that's you, send an email to your planning team here at Practice Financial Group and request them to send you a new payroll number. All it needs to say is, hey, give me the new payroll number for the PPP loan, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about, and they're going to send you the new number. Also, they're going to send you the calculation, all of the numbers that were used in calculating that amount. So you can take that calculation to your bank and you can say, here's my number. I didn't just invent this number. So that's the answer to that question. Great question, Kevin. Brian Miller, with the numbers we were sent for me by Maribel and Spencer, the employer payroll taxes were only $500. My contact at Columbia Bank said that it was up to interpretation. We can add more if we would like. Question is, where does that number come from, and should we increase it to add to the PPP? Brian, in your case, since you are doing the profit sharing, I would send an email to me and Spencer requesting that we send you a new number, and we're going to send you a new number today with the calculation, because you are doing the profit sharing, so your number is going to change in a material amount, might be to the tune of like $10,000 or something. Question 3 on the PPP app asks, if we own any other business, and if so, list in Addendum A, is our real estate corporation considered another business? Do we need to list it? No. If you own your building, and you own that building in a single member LLC, even if it has its own tax ID number, we would not include that in the PPP loan application. Great question. This would only apply if you have other ventures with other employees, okay? Colin Krause, my bank has a specific payroll calculator document. I sent that in to my planner this morning. Can you fill those out directly for us? Or will we receive PFG structured calculation, and then will we then translate? The answer to that question, Colin, is absolutely yes. We will do everything we can to help you get the right number to apply for your bank. Brian, what are the criteria for determining whether or not the loan will be forgiven? In the fine print, I saw a reference to the date, September 30th, but this information was vague. What is this? So, Brian, as soon as you receive the funds from the loan, that starts an 8-week clock. And you've got 8 weeks to run payroll, rent, and utilities. And particularly the forgiveness deals with payroll. And what they're doing is they're going to compare the payroll during this 8-week period to the payroll that was calculated before the 8-week period. So all of 2019, for example. and they're going to come up with a ratio for both the amount of payroll and the head count. And so, just for simplicity's sake, if you employ 75% of the people during the 8-week period that you did prior, then 75% of the costs allocated to payroll will be forgivable. That's how that works. Anthea, Nate, on the SBA website, it says forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. Forgiveness will be reduced if full-time headcount declines or salaries and wages decreases. Yes, that is true. So doesn't that wording strongly imply that as soon as we obtain the PPP funding, we need to rehire everyone quickly and get them off unemployment? So, Anthea, yes, great question. If you look at this loan only in the isolation of getting as much forgiven as possible, yes, what you're saying is correct. You should apply for the loan, get the loan forgiven, get the loan funds, and then immediately bring everybody back to work, pay them to twiddle their thumbs or pay them to do online marketing from you at home or whatever, pay them their full salary, and then those 2 months of pay will be forgiven. But the risk you run in doing that is that you burn through those funds, and that this shutdown, this quarantine, stay-in-place orders last a lot longer, and you run the risk of running out of money later, and you need those funds. So the specific strategy that you should employ, speaking to you, all of you collectively, will really depend on your individual circumstances. How much cash do you have in the bank? If you've got 3 years worth of payroll and 3 years worth of costs in the bank, you might be willing to roll the dice and bring everybody back off payroll and pay it. If you're running low and funds are tight and you really need these funds, then save it. Again, how long will you be in the desert? I don't know. And so that's the thing. The other thing to consider, as I've mentioned now twice, is the collateral damage of getting everybody kicked off unemployment. And so that's just something to be aware of. I don't know exactly how that would happen in your state with your unemployment laws in your state, but that's just something to be aware of. Very, very good question, though. Brady Camp raised your hand. Brady Camp, if you type your question in the chat box, I will try to find it and answer that if you had a follow-up question to that. Otherwise, I'm going to go on. And guys, we're over the hour. I'm going to keep going because I've still got energy and there are still a lot of questions. So if you're bored and you want to time out, go ahead and jump off. If you want to keep listening, I will keep answering questions to the very best of my ability. Blake Bivey, can you describe a scenario where we don't hit a home run but get a good base hit, and what would that look like with our practice? Okay, base hit, you get on base is you apply now for the funds, you secure the funds, you wait to use those funds. The 8-week period goes by, so none of those funds get forgiven. But when you're able to open your practice up again, and I don't know when that's going to be. I hope it's going to be as soon as possible. That's my hope and something I'm personally praying for. When you open your practice again, you have working capital to bring all of your employees back immediately. You have working capital to do a marketing campaign, to update your website, to send out an email blast to your patients. If it were me, I would, as soon as I open my doors, I personally, if I were a dentist, I would send out a direct mail campaign. I would start a direct mail campaign. I'd probably hire MVP Mailhouse, Aaron Boone and those guys, and I would ask them to do a direct mail campaign for me. I want my patients and I want the community to know ASAP that I'm open for business, and I want working capital available at that point in time. So that to me is a solid base hit. I'm on base and I haven't lost. A home run would be you timed this perfectly. You get the funds, you open your doors, and for the first 2 months in practice, you've got free employee costs. That would be a home run. That would be beautiful. Brian Coyes, what are the criteria? I already answered this. Dana Radcliffe, How many months of cash on hand would you feel is safe enough to wait around to try and hit a home run? Gosh, Dana, that is a really good question. I just don't have a crystal ball for that. Knowing you guys, I think we should talk about this offline, and I'd be happy to have a phone call with you and your partners. But I think you guys are in a position where you're not in an emergency situation where you have to run with the crowd, because I think you've got some time to just like see how this is going to happen. I would still apply for the loan, but I would try to delay the use of those funds and delay sending those. But to answer this question in general, what I've said a couple of times, for me, I'm using 6 months. 6 months. There's my direct answer. I want to make sure I'm going to survive for 6 months. Just a point on the 6 months. Once the dust settles from this PPP madness, the idle loan madness, all the legislation, all the what should I do, once the dust settles, at Practice Financial Group, we are going to have a mini consult with each one of our clients, and we're going to calculate exactly Dana's question, which is based on the cash you have available and based on the access to loans that you have available and based on your new and revised overhead at home and in the practice, how long will your funds last? So that is something that we're planning to calculate and go over with each one of our clients in a phone call once the dust settles, like I said. So great question, Dana. Brian Hatch, how do I account for the increase in payroll due to adding a day of production during this year? So Brian, when you calculate your average monthly payroll, I would utilize, if your payroll has changed materially, for example, if you added employees later on, then I would come up the 2.5 times monthly payroll. I would want to use the most current 2.5 months. Now you're going to have to. Now your bank has the responsibility and the authority to verify and to qualify you for the amount that you're requesting. So I would just go to my bank and say, hey, here are my 2019 numbers, but we hired all of these people late in 2019 or in early 2020. So my payroll numbers are higher, and I would request a higher amount from my bank, and hopefully they accept you and give you that higher amount. Okay, Dan Durnick, any update on being able to delay the PPP start date? I think I already addressed this, but I'll just say it again quickly here. There's no authoritative guidance yet on the ability to apply, secure the funds, and those two things are different, applying and securing the funds. It doesn't necessarily mean take receipt of the funds, but that means the bank says, yes, Dan, we have $100,000 saved for you. So there's applying, securing the funds, and then taking possession of the funds. There isn't authoritative guidance on this yet, so today the advice is apply and then wait to see what the other side does, and then we'll see what our next move is at that point in time. And in the meantime, apply and lobby the ADA to lobby Congress to have the specific thing addressed. Amy Jensen, what is included in the category for utilities? Could it include internet and phone? Yes, I believe so. No, those are utilities, internet and phone. I mean, those are modern day utilities. Can't do business without them. So the answer to that would be yes. So Dan asks, if we decline receipt of PPP because it's too early, can we apply again? Dan, there's no authoritative guidance on that question. Nobody else is asking that question, or at least answering that question authoritatively. So I would work that out with your bank. And I would just, again, if you have an option to take the funds now and decide to take them later and deny that option now, that would be like letting a pitch go by, going back to my earlier analogy, hoping for a better pitch later on, some risk in doing that. Brian Miller, if we decline receipt, or no, that's that. Brian Miller, is there any way I can buy stock in Zoom meetings? Ha, yeah, exactly, no kidding. Unfortunately, they're way too late for that. Gordon Lewis, Do you mean by not rush back to having all employees return? We will likely not need all to return at once we start back, but don't we need to retain 80% of our staff for loan forgiveness? I think we're looking at a whole new way of practicing, more time between patients, and possibly, for example, in my small practice, only need one. Yeah. Gosh, Gordon, great question. You know what? There's no easy answer to this question, Gordon. You're asking about the loan forgiveness portion, which nobody in America has gotten to that point in the game yet. So there's no precedence. There's very little authoritative guidance. There's no real life to change what's happening. What happened? Let me step back as well. Here's what happened. Congress passes a law, and then the whole world tries to apply the law, and it's in the application or the attempt to apply the law that everybody realized that the law wasn't written very well, or it didn't answer all of our questions. And so that's when everybody goes back, and that's when all of the subsequent guidance, that's what the SBA and the Treasury is doing right now, is they're saying, okay, Congress passed the law, here's what the law says, but now that everybody's trying to apply the law and it's created this big mess, we're trying to sort out all the Q&A to help people apply the law. So you're asking questions that pertain to the part of the law that nobody in America has even gotten to yet. So there's very little guidance on this part of the law yet. And we won't start seeing guidance come until people start getting to that point in the process where they're needing to apply and they're needing to figure out the use of the funds and forgiveness of the funds. That's when we'll start seeing a lot more clarification. So again, if it were me, I would apply now. Let me just say one other thing. I used the desert, analogy and all that, and trying to make the loan last. Here's another principle. You don't want the tail to wag the dog, right? You need to run your practice, and you need to serve your patients, and you need to run your practice and serve your patients in the very best way possible, using the best knowledge and information and clinical knowledge you have. You need to run your practice utilizing the circumstances of the times, right? You've got to abide by shelter-in-place laws. In some states, you can't just bring everybody back. In a lot of places, you can't just open your practice up. When you can open your practice, there may be, very likely will be restrictions on how you can practice, and those might be authoritative government-mandated restrictions, or it might just be your own conscience, or it might just be your employees, or whatever your circumstances. But again, don't let the tail wag the dog. The tail is this loan. Don't let this loan, and this is my own personal opinion, and this is my own personal advice. This is not authoritative. This is Nate Williams speaking to you now. I wouldn't let this loan dictate to me how I'm going to run my practice and how I'm going to necessarily even use these funds and the timing of the use of these funds. Now, of course, when I say that, I'm not implying that I'm going to go do something illegal or like something silly, like go buy Houston Astros tickets if I don't already own Houston Astros tickets. But I'm not letting this loan dictate how I run my practice, or at least I'm taking all of that into consideration, and maybe with a grain of salt. Brandon White, Wells Fargo, saying, if you got your name business in on their register this weekend through the Wells Fargo portal, you have a chance at getting some funds. Thanks, Wells Fargo. If you didn't, you have no chance with Wells Fargo. Do you have advice for people who have gotten their name in the registry with Wells? Yes, my advice is to go and apply with another bank. Well, I think Wells Fargo is a great bank. They do a lot of good things at other times, but they're really not happy right now, and neither are any of their customers. So my advice is I wouldn't wait around for some hope from Wells Fargo. I would go apply. Columbia Bank says that they're possibly taking applications from non-client, and then other smaller regional firms, local banks. Why smaller banks? Because they're not going to be inundated with the numbers that the big banks are. The other thing about the smaller banks is that they're going to be much more delighted to have a dentist walk in their doors. You're a much bigger fish in a very small pond with a small bank, so they're going to bend over backwards to try to help you. Whereas if you go to a big bank, they're not very impressed with you. So that's just the fact of it. And the big banks have a lot of other things like good technology and things like that, but that's that. Great question, and thanks for the intel, Brandon White. Ethan Larson, is the rent that we pay to our LLC that owns the building also forgivable? Great question, Ethan. We don't have specific guidance on that particular question. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of unanswered questions surrounding what is forgivable. At this point in time, if it's rent to myself, I'm not paying rent to myself yet at this point in time. And my opinion is that that will not be forgivable even in the future, because what is forgivable is the mortgage on your building. And that is expressly documented, is that the mortgage on the building or equipment or practice purchase loan, and it's not the mortgage payment, it's the interest portion of the loan that is forgivable. So I think you could end up getting yourself into trouble if you pay yourself a bunch of rent, call it rent, and say it's forgivable. That might be not a good idea. At least that's my understanding and interpretation. That's how I would advise you today, April 7th, 2020. Kelly Robinson, I don't see it either. Yeah. Christy Chapman, our bank isn't accepting applications yet. What do we do? So Christy, you're not alone. There are still a lot of banks. I would say even it's possible that the majority of banks are not accepting applications yet. The only banks who are accepting applications are the biggest banks who have the most money and the most resources. Bank of America, for example, it was told to me that they employed all of their whole entire programming team to work around the clock, literally overnight, for multiple nights to get their portal launched by the morning of April 3rd, which was last Friday. So most banks, even very good banks, still aren't taking applications yet. So what should you do? You should contact your bank and find out when are they going to start taking applications, and if they will start taking manual applications. For example, Columbia Bank, it was told to me during this webinar that they have launched their portal for online applications, but prior to that, they were accepting manual applications. So that's the first thing I would do, is say, contact your bank. If your bank has nothing good to tell you and you just get blank stares and not convincing answers, then I would start looking at other banks. And again, I would go with small local banks, regional banks, to try to apply, because you're not going to get anywhere with the big banks if you're not an existing customer. Okay. Great question. I just answered that question. Camden Brown, you're not saying we should hire the team back now, but rather hope that we can defer and not have to pay back the loan. Yeah. Again, Camden, this is a great question. And I think the answer to this question is, I've already answered it twice, so I'm not going to answer it again, but very specifically to all of you, if this isn't clear, once you apply and once you're approved, contact your planner. If there's any discretion as to when you receive the funds, after you've been secured the funds, contact your PFG planner and have a conversation about that so you can strategize together. Once you receive the funds, contact your planner again, not just by email. Get on the phone with us. We will get on the phone with you. If it's a night or a weekend or whatever, we'll get on the phone with you to talk through these things, because the very specific application to these questions is just that, very specific, and we need to talk through your individual circumstances. Okay, Rick Randolph, if I receive the EIDL 10K and decline the loan that follows, will the 10K become a grant? My understanding is yes, it will. Under the EIDL, the first 10K is a grant. subsequent funds are a loan. The question there is, a subsequent question that you didn't ask is, should you decline those funds? I don't know. I would be very inclined to take those funds right now to build up my war chest, or to build up my water reserve tank or my cash reserves as I go across the desert of this COVID virus. Okay, Anthony Mazawi, have any of your clients received funds from the EIDL loan? We took that polling question earlier. We asked everybody in the chat, Anthea, and everybody said no, they have not. Anonymous, I have a question about SBA loan. We received an email request to reapply to complete self-certification for the 4th time. Each time we reapply, our application gets pushed up further. What should we do? Great question, anonymous attendee. For those of you who are still listening, this is a really good question. If you're getting an email request, right now is a perfect time for spammers, or not spammers, but crooks, fraudsters, what are they called these days? Cyber criminals, to get false information. So if you get an email, be careful, check the address of the email. If the email is some crazy thing that you don't recognize, do not click on the link. That's just email management 101. If you get an email that purports to be from some authoritative source, do not click on the email. I haven't seen those yet. I haven't heard of those yet, but I expect that those will be coming. If you do click on a link and you're taken to some website that isn't SBA.gov, I would not reapply, and I would not enter personal information again. If you've already done that, I don't know what to tell you, but I would reach out proactively to the SBA and request directly from them, hey, did you send me this request for information? Because this is just prime time for cyber criminals to make a killing. Any reason to not apply for the EIDL loan now, Dan Dernick? If you haven't applied so far, our advice dating back a week was to apply for the EIDL loan, or maybe even longer than a week, was to go ahead and apply for that loan. If you haven't applied now, I don't know. I would ask that question to your bank where you're applying for the PPP loan at this point in time, because they're requesting that you refi that EIDL loan. So that's what that is. Ask your banker. Tyler Bryan, if in a partnership, do we list the S Corp as other businesses owned? Yes. For the answer in question 3 of the application, what are the other businesses? Yes, list the S Corps. Don't list a real estate entity, a single member LLC real estate that owns your building. But if you've got a partnership owned by 2 S Corps, list the S Corps in question 3. Great question. Brian Rush, I have a cash balance plan that makes my retirement contributions look large, but retirement contributions are included. Do we need to worry about that number messing up the application? So, Ryan, this was the very specific change in the guidance that came late yesterday, where the Treasury specifically referenced defined benefit plans as part of the contribution. A cash balance plan is a type of defined benefit plan. So what you need to do is reach out to Ryan Miller or Kyler and request that they recalculate this number for you, and they're also going to send you the details of the calculation. Matt Epperson, last year I was without my second employee, so lower payroll. So can I request more money from the lender based on the fact that I have 2 employees? So this is a great question, Matt. Another version of the same question that I already answered. Yes, my question is, or my recommendation is to use your most current payroll numbers, but don't try to hide it. Go to your lender. It's up to your lender. Your lender has the authority and the responsibility to verify that number. Go to your lender and explain the situation to them and say, hey, my payroll today is a lot larger than it was previously. And just be transparent about that. And they should, I would think, and I would hope that they would give you the larger amount. Last question. For sole member LLC, how do I calculate my payroll? If you're a single member LLC, not taxed as an S corporation with no employees, then I'm going to say send that email to coronavirus@practicefinancialgroup.com, because we're going to need to request additional information from you, and we'd be happy to help you with that question, Rick. Okay, everybody, that's the last question. Thank you all so much. For those of you who are still here, I'll maybe see you Friday. If not, thank you for joining, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.